Boker Tov, Chanukah Sameach to all. May we have a Hanukkah filled with miracles. Today's daf is Daf Lamed Vav. In Baba Kamas, we learned for Achenuch Beis Yisrael and Sunnah Sarv Shipya. The Mishnah had said that if Reuben had two animals, assuming they're both tam, we're assuming they're both tam now, and they were chasing Shimon's animal, and Shimon was damaged by at least one of them. We're not talking, not the first case where he says, well, how do you know it was my animal that did the damage? One of them obviously did the damage, but we don't know for sure which one. Tosis brings down a case if you know both, if you know for sure that it was done by both of them together. But we're talking very simply that they two animals, at least one of which damaged Shimon's animal. And Shimon said, pay me. So what's the case? It says over there, the Mishnah said, the very top line of Lamed Hamid Bey said, if they both belong to one guy, meaning Reuven owned the two animals that damaged Shimon's animal, they're both chayiv. Now, what are we speaking about? From the top of the page, the second, third line. They both have to pay. And remember that the tam pays out of the body of the animal. It's not the general obligation of the owner to pay out of his assets that he has at the bank, but he has to pay out of the asset of the animal. Again, we had a machlokas Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva that we're going to discuss again today. Rabbi Shmuel said the obligation is on the person. Yes, you're limited to the amount of money that the animal is worth, that the mazik animal is worth, but he pays it. He's an obligation to pay. Even if the animal were now to be lost, let's assume a simple case. My tam damaged your animal. And now my tam ran away. But as soon as after there was adjudicated, and I owe you half the value of the damages, right? Whatever the damages are to your animal, I owe you half. Is it like you own half? Now you own that portion of my animal, or is it that I have an obligation to pay? That's machlokas Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. But over here, we're assuming now that you have an obligation to pay from both animals. How does that work? You see from over here that if two animals who were tam, they were not regular damagers, it says they both have to pay. That means you can collect from either one. That's pretty strange. And that would assume, according to Rashi, since you can collect from one, if let's say one of them got lost, I can collect from the other one. In other words, it's an interesting thing. Reuben has two animals. They're both tam. Reuben admits that one of his animals probably is the one that damaged your animal, but we don't know which one. But if there's an obligation at that point, once they damage, and it's adjudicated that yes, it is the case that that Reuben is chayiv to pay for Shimon, even though he doesn't know which animal did it, and maybe that animal ran away, but there's an obligation immediately on the owner, on Reuven. In other words, once it's established and it's agreed that one of the two animals damaged Shimon's animal, then Reuben has an obligation to pay. Even if, let's say, the animal ran away, he has an obligation to pay. So that's a so you see over here, it's Shnei Shvarim Tamim, Sheziku, Ratzim, is like you can collect from either one. You don't know which one did it. Apparently, you don't know which one did it, and yet you can collect from either one. Is that really the case? So no, we're not talking about a shatum at all. We're not talking about a tam at all. We're talking about a mu'ed. Sure, mu'ed. One of my animals damaged you, I have to pay the full value. We don't care if the animal's here or not. It's not like, you see, if you say that they're tam animals and you can collect either one, even though one of them's not here, but wait a minute. According to Rabbi Kiva, what happens when a short tam damages the other one and the short tam has to pay half? It's not that he only has to pay half. The owner, the nizik, acquires that share of ownership in the animal itself, in the mazik's animal. How would that work here? Maybe that animal ran away. No, we're speaking about shor mu'ed. Doesn't mean that you can collect from either one. You can collect from the other one. No, it's not you're collecting from the animal. We're talking about a shor mu'ed. Shor mu'ed has nothing to do with the animal. The animal did the damage. The owner, the mazik, has to pay the full value. Once it's adjudicated, he has to pay the full value out of his assets. It has nothing to do with the animal, even if the animal's gone. And if you're talking about a shor mu'ed, look at the sefer. Look at the following case. Remember, let's say the mazik had two animals, a big one and a little one. Hanazik Omer, Hanizik Omer Gadol Hizik. The nizik says that the larger one did the damage, right? The large one. Why? because the larger one's worth more. So the chatzi nesek you'll have to pay is worth more, and it'll cover the damages. It'll at least cover the chatzi nesek, right? If it's a short tam, it would cover chatzi nesek. But why would that make a difference if you're talking about a mu'ed? A mu'ed pays the whole damages no matter what. We don't care if the animal's big or small. Whatever damage was done was paid. So look at the sefer. If the Masik had two animals, a big one, a little one, Nizik Omer, Nizik says Hagadol Hizik. Oh, so he should get a bigger share. He should be able to cover. He should be able to cover the whole, all the damage. But Masik Omer Loki Elakatan. No, it was the smaller one that damaged. Nizik Amotzi Mechabel of Araya. The Nizik must prove his case and say it was a big one. Even more than Minafkilamina. If you're talking about a shor, what's the difference? If it was a big animal, a little animal. I don't care if your cat attacked my cow. Whatever, if your cat is a mu'ed, he has to pay the full damage. What difference does it make which animal did it? So made to a malleable. He's got to pay for the full value of the damage. So El Malay, so he answered him. Rava from Parzika asked Rav Ashi, what's going on over here? So he first told him to talk about a mu'ed. If it's a mu'ed, what's the second case speaking about? Malay safe batam. The safe is talking about a tam. The case where one was a shore when I had a big, the mazik had two animals, a big one and a little one. And the nizik says the big one did the damage, right? The big one, so that he'll be able to cover the chatzi nezik from the whole body of the animal, not the small one. And the mazik said the reverse is true. So they were talking about a short tam because if it was a short muda, it wouldn't make any difference. So Beresha Mawad, but the Resha that says what? That if he had two animals and he admits, the mazik admits that one of his animals did the damage, but we don't know which one. It says they're both chayiv, meaning they're both chayiv. What if one's gone, you can pay from the other one? How does that make sense? You're paying out of the goof of the animal. No, we're speaking about a mu'ed. So that means that the Resha is a mu'ed and the safe is a tam. Even if you understand. So you say the Resha is speaking about a mu'ed, and that's how you get around the problem. You can collect from either one because it was a mu'ed. The words don't make sense. Why does it say chayavim, chayav gavra? Again, if you look at the top of Amid Beis on yesterday's app, it says if the masik had two animals, right? And it wasn't like, remember, if the two animals, the case previous was where there were three owners here. It'd say Reuben and Shimon, number one and number two's animals were chasing number three. Number three got damaged by one of them. Each one, number one, number two, said it was the other guys who did the damage, not me. So you got to prove the case. But let's say both animals, one and two, were both owned by the same guy, by Reuven. It says over there, if they belong to one guy and one of them for sure did the damage, they're both chayiv. What do you mean they're both chayiv to pay? You're paying out of the goof of the animal? Okay, so you say, no, you're not paying out of the goof of the animal. It's a mu'ed, so the owner has to pay. So why chayavim? It's not chayavim, not the animal. It's not like you're paying out of the animals. Chayav gavim miboy. Say the owner has to pay. Pursue my shneim. What do you mean both of them? He just has to pay. What are the animals? El olam a tam. Both cases are speaking about a tam. In other words, whether it's the two animals owned by one, and you say if Reuben owned both animals, it says they both chayav, and then the sefer that talks about gadol and katan is also speaking about a tam. For Rabbi Kiva, because no, it's not that the owner has an obligation to pay. Remember, when a tam damages another animal, the nizik, the owner of the damaged animal, becomes a partner to the extent that it covers chatzi nezek. He's only time chatzi nezek. He's a partner in the animal. The time it is from tabayu. That's what it means. Shneim chayavim, because they're both here. They're both here. So therefore, let's think about it. The Reuven, the owner, Shimon says one of your animals damaged mine. Says yes, I don't know which one, but they're both here. So I have a share in one of these. I don't know which one. I have a share in one of your animals. Pay me out of one of the animals. I can't push him off and say, get it from the other animal. Both animals are here, they're both mine, and you have a share in at least one of them. At least one, maybe two. If they're both of them did dash, but at least one. I have a lesson for him. Let's say they're not both here. Matzi Amrle, he could tell him, Zilai Siraya, the high Tura Askach Vasham, go bring the proof. I have two animals over here, number one and number two. Okay, you're claiming that one of my animals damaged you. Okay. I agree. Let's say I agree. Which one? You own a portion of one of them, right? You own a portion of one of the one that did the damage. Can you tell me which one? If they're both here, so he says one or the other. Pay me out of one or the other. I don't care. You owe me the money out of one or the other. Fine. But if one of them, let's say one ran away, can you prove that this is the one that did the damage? No, and therefore you can't prove it. That's how Rashi learns it. Rashi says, the last Rashi in before the Mishnah says, Rabbi Kiva Damar Shut Faninu, Beguf Shal Shor, Hilkach Avad Ashor. If you lost one of them, of a disco. It's only chayiv if they're both here. That's what means shneim chayav. If they're both here, they be less to buy ela echad. Amalei, you can say, I see where I bring me a proof. Ablo Shmuel, says Rashi, the Shmuel, keep the Amr Balchovu, so he says, I just owe the money, Vizuzi doesn't pay, Abarecha lo, he hasn't lost his chus. Tosis learns differently. Last Tosis says differently. No, even according to Rabbi Shmuel, according to Rabbi Shmuel, he says, according to Rabbi Shmuel, if he would lose his even the Amr Balchovu, Vizuzi doesn't pay, Abarecha lo chus. According to Tosis, he would lose chus even according to Rabbi Shmuel, because even Rabbi Shmuel says he owes the money, but if the animal's not here, you don't know this animal did the damage, and you wouldn't be able to collect. That ends the third parak. We begin the fourth parak. And again, we're dealing with the machlokas between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. Shor shenagach arba b'chamisha shor. Let's say you have a short tam that damaged 4 or 5 different animals. Now, how could it be a short tam if he damaged 4 or 5 different animals? After the third animal, he's already chayiv. Okay, so we talked about before. Let's say he did it on you have to have 3 different days, etc. So 3 different days for the warning, or 3 different days, even if he did it on the shore did all the damage on one day, but the owner has to be warned 3 times. But let's say, so how did he have 4 or 5 times? So Rashi says it's very simple. Let's say he damaged the shore, the damaging shore, the mazik, damaged one shore. Then he saw another shore, and he didn't damage him. Then he saw another shore, and he damaged him. Then he had 2 or 3 opportunities, and he didn't damage them. So he's not, doesn't become a mu'ud. Mu'ud is only if he damaged, every time he sees an animal, he damaged him. Or if he damaged him, let's say, only on Shabbatot. Every Shabbos he damaged the animal. During the week he did. But he set some sort of a pattern, a chazaka. He had a pattern that he did. Then he's a shor mu'ud. So here we're not talking about a shor mu'ud. We're talking about a shor tam. Okay, let's say again, Reuven owned this animal, a masik, and he went and he damaged. Now what happens now? And he damaged one after another. But he's still a tam. So remember, a tam pays chatzi nezek out of the goof of the animal. Out of the goof of the animal. So what happens over here? We'll see the cases. Yishalom la'achron pays the last one. Because remember, the last one that was damaged has to get paid out of the goof of the animal. You say, well, wait a minute. Well, what about the earlier guys? What about them? Okay, but their animal, think about it, their animal maybe also, once their animal was damaged and they became owners in the first animal, in the damaging animal in the mazik, so their animal also did damage to the latter ones. So it's very fractions exactly. So Yisham La'achron Shabbat. If there's enough left over, let's say he says 4 or 5 different cases, right? 4 or 5 different animals. So you have a shor shenagach, 4 or 5 different animals. So you pay the last one. Then yesh b'mos, if there's anything left, you return to the one. Then yesh b'mos, if there's still extra, you give the one liftei, you give it to the previous one. The last one gains the most because he's paid his full half nezek, his full chatzi nezek. The last one, because the last one was damaged by those that belong to him. If you assume you're going like Rabbi Kiva, that he owns the animal, so we'll see. Rav Meir. If you go like Rabbi Shmuel, the Gemara is going to say, "What do you mean? As soon as he damaged the first one, so the nizik, the first guy, the first nizik, he gets half, right? Half. Let's say he gets his half. Now he owns that money. That's his money. So then the next guy gets half of what's ever left, right? And so it should be that the first guys get the most. Anyway, but here he says, Rav Meir says the last guys get the most. The Gemara is going to try to explain this. This is difficult to understand. Rav Shimon disagrees. Rav Shimon says a little slightly different. He says, listen, take a case. Shor Shavim Masayim. A shor, the mazik is worth $200. Shenegel Shor Shavim is also worth $200. Take a simple case. They're both worth $200. The mazik and the nizik. And when the mazik kills the nizik's animal, he's worth nothing. So the dead animal, let's just say simple case. So what's the damage? What's the total damage? $200, right? My $200 animal killed his $200 animal. So the damage is $200. Okay. Zen no toman. So what happens in that case? The mazik, the first guy, he keeps half, and the other guy gets half. He pays half out of the $200 animal that he has. So the nizik got $100, and the mazik keeps the $100, right? They sell the animal, the chatzu es kaspo, and they split it. Each get $100. Now, this animal went, the mazik, and damaged another one. Okay, so let's go on. So now he damaged another animal, the second nizik. This is the third animal involved, but the second nizik. So Shoshim also worth 200. Now, the last guy gets the last animal, then the second nizik gets the $100 because he's entitled to half the money, half the value of the animal. So the fun of it, and the ones before him, the mazik and the first nizik each get 50 because you can only get $200 out of the original animal, and the last one gets the 200. Why is that? We'll see if it goes like Rabbi Kiva. Let's say now the original animal now damaged a third nizik. I'm also worth 200. The last guy gets 100. The second nizik gets 50. And the first guys, the mazik and the first nizik, each get 25. That's the dinners of is 25. So we're going to understand these cases. Both Rav Meir and Rav Shimon say something over here. Let's go understand. Masnis and the Mishnah says Mishnah because yeah.
If he sold the animal after each one in order to pay the debts, okay, so the new owner has a $200 animal.
That's correct. If he sold it, you're 100% right. He didn't sell the animal here. If he would sell the animal, tell me that's a different case. He didn't sell the animal. The animal's still his, presumably. Okay, if you sell the animal, it's a different case. You're right. Masnis and money, the local Bishmal, local Bishmal. Our mission doesn't go like a Bishmal. The first sheet of Rav Meir apparently doesn't go like a Bishmal or like a Bekiva. Because what's this? Ikar Bishmal, Bishmal, the Amar Bal Chov Nenu. In other words, the mazik owes the money. Yes, you have to sell the animal, but he owes the money. It's not like the Rabbi Kiva says, remember that the nizik owns half the animal, right? It owns half the animal. Nafkamina be if he was makdish it, if he can be makdish if he owns half or not. Rabbi Shmuel says, no. The nizik is owed half his damages from the mazik, and he owes the money. Yes, can only get the money out of selling the animal, but he owes him the money. So if that's the case, why do you say Achron? This going to be boiled. The first one should be get it right. When the mazik damaged the first animal, the nizik first animal, so the mazik owes him $100. He gets his $100. What's the issue? Now your mazik goes and does more damage. So then, okay, but you can only take it out of the $100 animal, right? You can only take it out of that. He owes him the money. He didn't sell the animal yet and split the money, but he owes. It's the same animal though. But so the latter ones should get less and less because there's the only value that the mazik owns in the first animal is now $100 left. Now that $100 animal is going and damaging a second nizik, so he should get half of that. In other words, the latter guys should get less, not the first guys should get less. So again, so if he says goes like so the Mishnah, Rav Meir, the first sheet of the Mishnah doesn't sound like a Bishmal. Ikar Bekiva, if you go like a Bekiva, number 2 or the Shitfinenu, that the mazik's animal now belongs to both the mazik and the nizik. Shahai yesh bo moser yachzer l'sholafan. What do you mean? You return to the early guy. Yachzer l'kula mi boile. They all have a share in it. Remember, if you hold like a Bekiva, once the mazik did damage the first nizik, now they're both partners. Then this animal went and damaged another animal, then they're all partners, right? They're all partners. What do you mean, Yachsul L'Fanav? L'kulam, not just to the first guy, to the front of him. Yes, you return the money to all of them. You say, Rav Meir said, what did Rabbi Shmuel say? So what's this? If that's Rav Shimon, we're talking about Rav Meir. Rav Meir says, if there's more, if Yesh Mamos, Yachsul L'Fanav. If Yesh Moser, Yachsul L'Fanav. Why don't you should answer? You should pay all of them. Each lefi masha you just pay. You return to you get everybody gets paid according to their share. It sounds like you return to the earlier one. And the earlier one leaves. He gets his whole half. In other words, it sounds like the one previous gets his share. If there's anything left over, he gets his share, and the earlier guys lose. No, boy, they all have a share in it, whatever their share is, because everybody had a share in this animal. The mazik had a share, and the nizik had a share. Then the second nizik had a share. Then the third nizik had a share. So what do you mean that you give back to everybody according to what their interest was in the animal? It's not just like sounds if there's anything left over, give it to the previous nizik. Like number 3 returns. We'll call the niziks number 1, number 2, number 3. If there's anything left over, give it to number 2. What do you mean number 2? And number 1 gets nothing, and the owner gets nothing. They all had a share in the animal. He says shachsul kulmi boile. So it doesn't sound like a bishmuel like Kiva. Amarava, the top of the first line on the base. Laolam kabishmuel. Really, it goes like a bishmuel. The Amar Bali Chovus and he owes him. Udakashlach achron nisker rishon nisker mi boile. If he owes the money, he owes the money to the first guy. He owes him $100. Okay. Now the second guy, so he owes him less, right? Because he only had an interest of $100 in the animal. The owner only had effectively $100 in the animal and more. So it should be rishon niska, like Rashi said. And I'm an Aleph. They look back Rashi for a second. Ein rishon shutav bo the first guy is not She'ein Rishon. The first Rishon here means the first Nizik. It's not it doesn't own it. Shetei Shimras Alav, L'Schai Ben Zaken. In other words, according to Bishmal, the first Nizik doesn't own the animal. He just owed $100. Right? So Va'achron Yapsit Ein Rishon Shutaf Bo Shetei Shimras Alav L'Schai Ben Nizikim. So therefore, the first Nizik should get his $100. First Nizik should get his $100. For the animal damage, 200, right? Killed the animal. I get my 200. I'm entitled to my $100, half the Nezik, right? My first Nezik. Now the second guy, he should get less maybe, but not the first. The first guy shouldn't lose. The first guy should get the most. According to Bishmal, the answer is no. In the fourth line. What happened here is the Nizik grabbed the animal. Now, the truth is, we're saying according to Shmuel, that the mazik owes the nizik the $100. The first nizik, right? $200 damage of $200, kill the animal. The animal's worth nothing. I get chatzi nizik. I'm the first nizik, right? The first nizik, number one. He should get his $100, right? What he did was he grabbed the animal. He grabbed the animal like I'm gonna guard the animal now, and he becomes a shomer sacher. Well, how is he paid? He's paid because by guarding the animal doesn't disappear. Remember, if the animal disappears afterwards and you can't find the animal, nobody gets paid anything, even according to Bishmuel. You're only entitled, he owes him the money, but only out of the animal. If the animal's not here, you don't get paid. So, the nizik grabbed it. Why? How is he paid? He's being paid by being guaranteed his money for whatever damage, for his $100. That's his $100 value in the mazik's animal. Not that he owns the animal, but he's owed that $100 out of the animal. So therefore, what happens? Each one of them grabbed the animal. The nizik number one grabbed the animal. The nizik number two, after he grabbed the animal. Each one became a shomer sacher, and therefore, when the animal went and damaged a second time, careful, right? First, the mazik damaged number one. Number one, the owner of number one grabbed the animal, kept the animal. Now that animal went and did damage again. So you know what? Now who's responsible? The shomer sacher is responsible because he should have guarded him. So he has to pay everything. That's the point. So he loses his share. He loses his share now. He had a share of $100. He loses it. And v'naslav k'shomer sacher. Ihachi yeshbo moser yachsul lefon. So what do you mean? It says if this, I'm actually returned to the board. Yachsul lebalam boy, like they all owe the money to whom? The owner. With the first mazik, the owner, he owns $100 in that animal, right? The first nizik grabbed the animal, became a shomer sacher. Shomer sacher went and he did damage, right? So the animal now is under the jurisdiction of the nizik. Then he went and he damaged another animal. The second owner, the second nizik, he grabbed the animal and guarded it, and then it went and did more damage, and so on and so forth. So each one, number two, kept losing their share because they're responsible for it. What about the original owner? He still has his $100 share in the animal because he when it was under his jurisdiction, the animal did one damage, right? Damage number one. Now he has to pay out of that to the first nizik, but he still has $100 his value in the animal. So what do you mean yachsul lefaanav? If there's any extra, it should go back to the owner because he owns the $100 in the animal first. Listen carefully now. He means this. If there's more, let's say the second animal was worth more, it's not that they're all worth 200. The second one's worth more than the third one. The third one's worth more than the fourth one. The fourth one's worth more than the fifth one. So then, let's say the fifth one is worth very little, only $10, right? So therefore, again, they all lost their share because they were bad shomrim, right? They lost their share. But if there's anything left over, right? Why? Because the fifth one only was worth $10, so there was very little to pay. So if there's anything left over there, besides the $100 that the first guy owned, that the mazik has in it, there's something left over, that'll go back to the previous guy. And if to number four, and if number four's animal is worth less than number three, so number three, there's still left over between the original $200, where the $100 goes to the mazik, and now the last guy, the fifth guy, there's only the animal's only worth $100 or $20. There's something left over that goes back to number four, and that goes back to number three. Number two, if there's leftover, that's what he means. Rabin came here, so he said, this is not a simple case. This mission is not like it meets the eye. We're not talking about where the owner had an animal and he went and did damage and did damage and did damage and did damage. The same animal with nobody taking it. In these cases, are speaking about where the the first nizik grabbed the animal, he became a shomer sacher, and now he's responsible. If his animal goes and does damage, so when he grabbed the animal, he grabbed an animal that half of which really belongs to the owner, whether you go like a Kiva or Bishmal, half of which belongs to the owner, and the other half he kept as collateral, but he was negligent in his duties, and when the animal did damage, he lost his share because he's responsible for the whole animal. He lost his share. That's what happened over here. And each one, so on, each time that it did damage, the nizik grabbed the animal. Okay, Maya come to Rabbi Shmuel. If you say this goes like Rabbi Shmuel, and that's why, again, according to Rabbi Shmuel, in a simple case, the first guy would get his $100, and if the mazik animal did more damage, etc., you get it out of that, right? So Maya came to Rabbi Shmuel. Look at the sefer of Shimon Omer. This is all like a quote from Mishnah. Sure, a $200 animal damaged to an animal, and then it's worth nothing. The animal's worth nothing. Each guy gets $100. Sure, if the animal did damage and went and did it damage in nizik number 2, also worth 200. Again, the last guy, the nizik sheni, whose animal's worth 200, he gets chatzi nizik, right? He gets $100 out of that. The mazik and the first nizik each get 100. Why? Because the animal went, this animal went and did. We'll see. This goes like Rabbi Kiva. You own the animal now. According to this, you own the animal. So your animal, together with the mazik, the nizik number 1, mazik, and the mazik are partners in this animal. And this animal went and did damage to number 2, to nizik number 2. Nizik number 2 is titled to half his money, and the partners each get their half, which is they each get a half of a half. They each own half the animal, so they have to pay half out of this animal. It's the same animal, and the other half they split. Then the animal damaged a third animal, also worth 200. Now they're all partners. Nizik number 2 and nizik number 1. They're all partners. So what happens now? So now when he damaged a third animal, he gets his half, the last guy, because this animal damaged that guy, damaged his animal, and it's worth 200, so he gets half. The one before gets 50 because he owned half of the animal that was left before, meaning the original owners it's like when you invest in something and then they bring in new owners, right? So your share gets diluted. What do they call that? Something like that. Your ownership gets diluted, right? They split it, right. So here, the original ones, the mazik and the first nizik, they each get 25 because each time the animal damages, the damagee, the nizik, gets half of whatever's there, half what's ever there. So their shares keep getting diluted. And that's it. So that goes like Rabbi Kiva, the tour this shit for you. This only works if you hold that the animal belongs to the nizik gets a share in the animal. So his share keeps getting diminished as it goes on. In other words, the first time the mazik damaged, the mazik owned the animal. So he splits it with the nizik. Now they each own 50% of the animal. These partners now, their animal went and damaged number 2. So number 2 gets his half out of this animal, and their shares are diminished, right? Because he's also a partner now, but he has a partner for 50. Each new guy who comes in gets 50% of the animal. So the other guys, their shares keep getting diminished. So that's the case, Reish Rabbi Shmuel, but Sefer Rabbi Kiva, that's what you're saying here. The ratio we explained goes like Rabbi Shmuel with this whole convoluted case about how the nizik went and grabbed the animal and he was a shomer sacher and therefore he lost his share, and it goes on and goes on and goes on. Each time the same thing happens. So the first goes Rabbi Shmuel, but Sefer Rabbi Kiva, Amri Ein. The Amr Shmuel of Rabbi Yehuda. We had this more before that Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, Shinna, a smart kid, Shvok Masisin, don't try to explain this mission that goes like one shita. The Tabas Rai, follow me. Reish Rabbi Shmuel, but Sefer Rabbi Kiva. That's the only way you can learn this. Tanan, skip the parentheses. Tan Hasan, we learned elsewhere. Where is that? Later on, and we had this case before. You slapped somebody on their ear, or some say you actually blew a shofar, you blew something into his ear, you damaged him, you embarrassed him. You might have hurt him too, you might have caused him hearing loss. But what do you pay for embarrassing him? You have to pay a seller. Seller is 4 zuz. Pay a seller. Basically, the money, you pay him $100, 100 zuz. A lot. Now, there was a case, there was a case like that. A guy slapped another guy on the ear, and they didn't know what to pay. This took place in Bavel, so they couldn't paskin because it's a knas. I mean, this is all like a knas. How much do you pay? Right? So Rashi says it was sort of like a knas, even though you pay boshes, but I guess how it's determined, you wouldn't collect it in bubble. Maybe it's usually knasos you can't, but if it's real damages, maybe it's I don't know why Rashi says that. Rashi says that you wouldn't collect it in bubble as if it's a knas. So maybe in this case he considered it a knas. But anyway, he also calls it boshes. Rashi says to make boshto levad tsar besides the tsar, but those are real money things. So it's not just a knas. So, but anyway, you wouldn't have collected in bubble, but maybe they didn't have a proper bezdin in bubble. Anyway, Rav Tufya Bar Masa sent to Rav Yosef. Okay, he says over here that the Keich Vera, the Tanakama says you pay a sela. What sela is that? A sela tsuri, a Tyrian sela, which is the golden sela, and that's worth 4 zuz. Tanan o sela Medina. Are we talking about a sela Medina, a sela that they used in the country, meaning that was worth only an eighth of that? If a sela tsuri is 4 zuz, an eighth of that would be a half a zuz, right? So which one is speaking? Amalei Tanesua. Let's learn a proof from our Mishnah. That's what this Gemara is. That's why the Gemara is here. It says a Shnaim Rishonim dinar zav. In the last case, remember the last case when he damaged a third time, it says that the original guys, the mazik and the nizik, only get 25. Isa Kedai Tani Tana Sel. If we're talking about a Sela Medina, which is a Sela Medina, which is a half a zuz, niflik v'nesniya trace of a Sela. Why do you talk about that? Why do you only talk about the mazik and the nizik? 50%, right? He went and damaged another one. Now the original guys only get what? They only get 50-50. Then he damaged a third time. So the original guys get 25-25. Why 25? You could take it another step. Say there's another case. If he damaged a fifth time, the original guys would get 12.5. Why? Because say tracer 12 a sela. A sela is a half a zuz. So it could work out that it doesn't only go down to 25 and 25. You can go down to tracer. We're assuming you don't want to mention half zuzas. We're not going to give you cases. Only we're talking about full sellers, but full amounts of money, like a full zuz or a dinar or whatever it is. But you don't want to talk about half. So you say, but if the seller is a seller Medina, that is a half a zuz. So you could say, give him 12 zuz plus a seller, which is a half a zuz, which is a complete figure. It's like a coin. You don't want to go left. You don't want to talk about a half penny. There was once a half penny. No half pennies. We go down to a penny. So go down to a penny. You could take it. I'm like, that's no. And therefore, it must be speaking about where the seller that we're talking about in the Gemara is a seller tsuri. Because if it's a seller Medina, you could have talked about this case going down to a fourth one that was damaged, a fourth animal was damaged, and then the original owners, the mazik and the nizik, the mazik and the first nizik, would each get 12.5, which is trace of a seller. You think he's got to keep on going and going? We're talking about a fourth one and a fifth one. We get the idea. After he damaged the first nizik and the second nizik and the third, so we get the idea. You don't have to keep going on. You don't have to say that Tan has to go like a peddler listing on every single possible case. So you can't prove anything from our Mishnah. But what's the halacha? So they decided from this case. I'm going to be in Rav. Call kesef omer b'Torah. When they talk about kesef in the Torah, that's kesef tsuri. Kesef tsuri, that's money, gold. And Rashi, it's based on gold, right? Mishkalo zav. So that's kesef tsuri. V'shal debrayim. We talk about the halacha that the rabbi said, which is this that the rabbi said. That's even though it's boshes and boshes is usually money, but Rashi says it's a sort of a knas to decide how much that is. Kesef adina, right? Because usually boshes depends on Gemara, and we'll see about more. Boshes depends on the embarrasser and the one who was embarrassed, the one who was shamed, right? Depends. Were you embarrassed by a lowly person, by an upper person, by a higher person? A king is embarrassed as more busha than a lowly person. That depends on that. But here apparently it was like a knas. If you hit him on his head, there's a fixed knas. The knas is a seller. So he says since he says anything that the rabbis determine, if it's not a kesef in the Torah, it's a kesef that the rabbis talk about, it's a kesef Medina, so therefore it turns out it is a kesef Medina. So therefore, what's the punishment for slapping somebody on their ear? What's the boshes? A selah Medina, which is a half a zuz. Omer lei hu gavra, so the guy who did the damage, that now you've determined that it's a half a zuz, the guy who did the damage says, well, if it's only half a zuz whole, palagazuzah, what are you going to give me, 50 cents? Do you think I care about that? Lo ba'ina, I don't need it. Nesva lenium, give it to the poor. Like somebody says, somebody don't bother giving me the change. Put it in the stucco box. Let's give it to the poor. Harameh said, yeah, you know what? I changed my mind. Give it to me. Azel for every ben afshar. I'll go. I'll heal myself. I'll take a little tonic. I'll get myself a Coke, or I'll go for a schwitz, or I'll do something. I'll use it. Rabbi Yosef says, no, it's too late. Don't forget, Rabbi Yosef is the one we asked. They can't afford Rabbi Yosef. Is it sell it suri or not? So he was poshing it from that it's a selah Medina, because since it's halacha drabanan over here, it's a kanas that the rabbanan gave for the boshes. So it's only a half a zuz. It's a sell medina, which is a half a zuz. So now this guy says, first he said, give it to the poor guys, put it in that stucco box. Then he says, you know what, give it back to me, I'll take it back. Rav says, no, you can't. For the aniyim already acquired it. There's no ani here. There's no ani right here, right now. He says, you know what? Anan yad aniyim anan. We are the representatives. The Bezdin is the representatives of the poor people. We are effectively like the Gabon. We already acquired the money. Don't remember Shmuel. Yisomim, poor children, poor orphans, ain't shrichim prusbul. You know, remember, what does he do with the prusbul? Remember, we did the prusbul. You did a prusbul that you give your loans over to the Bezdin so they can be collected even after Shemitah is over, right? But if some don't need a prusbul, why? Why? Because they're like their guardians. The Bezdin is like the guardians, and they've already acquired their loans for them. It's like it's already been given over to them. And Tosas points out that even though you only write a prusbul if the lova has karka, so maybe in this case the lova didn't have any karka, Bezdin gives them a piece of karka too to make it work. In other words, we're representatives of them. So the same way we're representatives of the aniyim, you can't change your mind. Here it tells you another story. Hanan Bisha, Hanan the scoundrel, bad guy, Takalehu Gavra, he slapped him on his ear. Also coming to him for a puna. Amalei, still have like Palgazuza. Remember, we've already paskin. What do you get for that? A sell medina. Give him a half a zuz. He had a rubbed out, a worn out zuz. You know, a zuz that nobody wants. Can you change it? Nobody wanted it. So boy, he wanted to Palgazuza. He had a worn out zuz, and he wanted to give him a half a zuz out of that. Okay, I have to pay him half a zuz. I'll pay him out of that. But Lahavi Mishtako lay. Nobody would change it for him. He wasn't able to. Can you give me change of this? They looked at the zus and they said, "I'm not going to give you change. I don't want this worn out zus." Nobody wanted to give him change. So Takala Achrina, so he slapped him on the other ear, the Avanilla, and he gave him the worn out zus because you have to pay half a zus for each one. So he said, "Okay, I have no choice. I got to pay. I can't get a half a zus out of this." So he slapped him the other one and gave him one. It's like a joke, but that's what happened. Tomorrow's daf is daf Lamed Zayin. Will be on the podcast, and on Sunday, Mirz Hashem, we'll pick it up from the top of Lamed Ches. Shabbat Shalom, Chanukah Sameach, Afresh and Chanukah, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, beautiful.